Right now, as you're hearing this, your mind is processing reality in a way that 99% of people simply can't grasp. Carl Jung devoted decades to studying minds like yours. By the end of this video, you'll know if you're part of that rare 1% who thinks in patterns that most can't even perceive. But here's what Jung discovered that might shake you to your core. These rare minds don't just think differently. They function on what I call psychological frequencies that operate beyond ordinary awareness. If you've often felt like an outsider, like you're speaking a different language even when it's your native one, there's a scientific reason behind that. Jung identified 8 distinct patterns in these exceptional minds. The 8th one will completely change how you view your own mental design. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share isn't just psychology. It's a blueprint for understanding why your mind has always felt like it came from another species. Jung once said, "The meeting of 2 personalities is like the contact of 2 chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But what happens when your personality functions across multiple dimensions while others live within just one? If you have this kind of mind, you don't simply hear words. You process emotional frequencies, historical layers, future consequences, and subconscious motives all at once. When someone says they're fine, you're decoding information streams most people can't even sense. I call this multidimensional processing, rooted in Jung's idea of the transcendent function. Your mind's ability to merge conscious and unconscious material in real time. You're not just listening. You're reading the entire symphony of someone's psyche. And here's where it gets deep. This also explains why social interactions drain you. Jung found that such minds naturally tap into what he called the collective unconscious, a profound layer of shared human experience that most never reach. You're interpreting not just personal data, but archetypal patterns tied to universal human stories. Think about it. When you watch a movie, do you sense plot twists not from clues, but from feeling the mythic structure underneath? Do you finish people's sentences, not by guessing, but by feeling the pull of their thoughts? Comment below if you've ever known how someone's story would end before they finished telling it. I read between dimensions. This dimensional awareness brings your first major challenge. While others engage on a surface level, you're constantly translating across multiple layers of reality. But Jung uncovered something even more isolating about minds like yours. He wrote, "The dream is the small hidden door in the deepest and most intimate sanctum of the soul." But what happens when you're fluent in the symbolic language of dreams even while awake? This is what I call symbolic consciousness, the second undeniable mark of your rare mind. You don't just comprehend metaphors, you think in them. Your mind naturally converts real-world experiences into symbolic meaning, revealing archetypal patterns beneath everyday life. Jung spent years studying what he termed active imagination, the ability to interact with symbols and images as living psychological realities. If you have this kind of awareness, you're doing it constantly without realizing it. A simple chat about someone's work turns, in your mind, into an exploration of their struggles with authority, creativity, or personal power. What makes this extraordinary is Jung's discovery that symbolic consciousness connects to what he called prospective elements, your psyche's ability to sense future psychological evolution. You're not just perceiving what is, you're intuitively feeling what's about to unfold. That's why you're drawn to layered stories others find confusing, to art and music that seem to speak directly to your inner self, to philosophy, ancient wisdom, and mythology. The issue. When you share these symbolic insights, most people look at you blankly, as if you're speaking fluent dream language to those stuck in literal waking thought. Comment if you've ever tried explaining a feeling and been told you're too abstract. I speak in symbols, not just words. Jung recognized that this symbolic fluency isn't a flaw. It's proof that your mind accesses deeper levels of meaning. Yet, it also leads to a greater sense of isolation. And this is where most people begin to feel uneasy. But Jung uncovered something profound about rare minds. They have a deep fascination with what he called the shadow, the hidden, denied, and repressed parts of human nature. If you possess this form of consciousness, you don't just accept that people have darker sides, you're genuinely intrigued by the psychological systems that create them. While others are satisfied labeling actions as good or evil, your mind searches for the underlying patterns. I call this shadow integration consciousness, born from Jung's groundbreaking realization. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Your mind instinctively moves toward revealing what's hidden in the unconscious. But here's what unsettles others. As Jung noted repeatedly in his research, you're not drawn to darkness out of morbidity. You see it as essential data for understanding the full human psyche. You know that real self-knowledge demands acknowledging both light and shadow. That's why you're often captivated by morally complex characters, drawn to true crime not for thrill but for psychological depth, and interested in taboo subjects most avoid. You seek to understand, not to judge. Jung described this as psychological wholeness, the unification of light and dark aspects of the self. Most people still live through psychological splitting, dividing the world into right and wrong, good and bad, but your perception transcends these binaries. The challenge is that this fascination with the shadow can make others uneasy. They operate from what Jung called persona identification, fully merged with their socially approved mask, projecting their hidden darkness onto others. Comment below if you've ever been called dark, just for asking questions others fear. You're not dark, you're whole. Yet Jung discovered that this integration of shadow leads directly to the most isolating trait of rare consciousness. He described the psyche's natural movement toward unity and meaning as the transcendent function. But what happens when your awareness naturally functions from that transcendent level, surrounded by people focused only on surface survival? This is what I call existential homesickness, the fourth clear marker of your rare mind. It feels like longing for a home that doesn't exist in ordinary reality, a realm where depth, truth, and genuine connection are the standard, not the exception. Jung explored this deeply in his theory of individuation, the psychological process of merging the conscious and unconscious self into wholeness. If you live with this form of awareness, you're drawn to the ultimate questions. Why are we here? What is the meaning of existence? How can beauty and suffering coexist? But here's the challenge Jung observed. While most people are content with what he termed collective adaptation, fitting neatly into society's roles and norms, your psyche demands authentic self-realization. You reject shallow explanations because your mind hungers for truth. This orientation breeds a unique form of loneliness Jung called psychological isolation. You can be surrounded by people yet feel like the last of your species. It's not social loneliness. It's the solitude of existing in another layer of consciousness. People with this awareness often feel like they're in exile from their true home, seeking meaning where others see routine, questioning assumptions most never notice, finding kinship in books, art, and music rather than human company. This existential homesickness isn't depression. It's proof that your consciousness has evolved beyond collective boundaries. Jung referred to such people as cultural creatives, individuals whose psychological growth foreshadows humanity's next evolutionary stage. The isolation grows sharper when you share these existential realizations, only to meet discomfort or deflection toward more practical topics. Yet Jung recognized something vital about this homesickness. He revolutionized psychology by showing that every symptom and behavior carries hidden meaning, expressions of deeper psychological conflict. But what happens when your mind instinctively excavates those buried layers beneath human behavior? This is what I call psychological archaeology, the fifth sign of rare consciousness. You don't just sense when someone's being false. You can identify their defense mechanisms, childhood wounds, and the authentic self trying to break free beneath layers of conditioning. Jung's analytical psychology was founded on this idea. Every symptom holds a symbolic message. If you possess this kind of mind, you perform this analysis unconsciously, endlessly reading the subterranean landscape of human emotion. But here's what makes it both remarkable and draining. While most people take social interactions at face value, your mind is constantly decoding multiple streams of data. Fleeting micro-expressions that contradict spoken words, subtle body movements exposing hidden feelings, voice tones revealing internal tension, and behavioral patterns hinting at unconscious drives. Jung found that this perceptual sensitivity originates from what he called intuitive perception, your ability to read the psychological atmosphere surrounding others. You don't just observe a person. You sense their entire psychological ecosystem. Modern therapeutic fields, from narrative therapy to symbolic dream analysis, have validated Jung's ideas. Unlike Freud, who focused mainly on repressed desires, Jung-inspired psychology recognizes that your mind naturally accesses both personal and collective symbolic imagery. You're practicing psychological archaeology, decoding archetypal patterns that shape human behavior, the same motifs appearing in myths, dreams, and stories across civilizations. This archaeological consciousness explains why people confide in you effortlessly, even without prompting. You're often drained by small talk and superficial gatherings, craving honest and emotionally rich exchanges instead. Sometimes, you understand someone's inner world better than they do. But Jung noticed that this heightened perception carries a cost: deep isolation. You live among people wearing complex psychological masks, yet you're one of the few who can see the performance behind them. Comment if you've ever felt weighed down by perceiving what others can't. I see the person behind the mask. Jung emphasized that this archaeological awareness isn't a curse. It's a bridge connecting conscious and unconscious realms. But it also leads to an even more complex layer of cognition. This is where your mind becomes almost impossible for others to grasp. Jung discovered that the most evolved minds possess what he called paradoxical thinking, the capacity to hold opposing truths simultaneously without forcing them into simplistic binaries. I refer to this as both and consciousness. It marks a shift away from the rigid either or thinking that dominates ordinary thought. If you possess this rare mind, you don't just accept paradox. You see it as the most accurate reflection of reality. Jung's entire psychology was founded on paradox. The wiser you become, the more aware you are of how little you know. True strength arises through vulnerability. Individuation demands both self-focus and unity with others. Healing unfolds not through rejection of pain, but through embracing it. What makes this so alien to most people is that they need clarity and closure, while your mind thrives in complexity. You sense that life's deepest truths exist in the tension between opposites. You understand people can be both selfish and compassionate, that behaviors can simultaneously wound and protect, that emotions can hold conflicting meanings. Real truth often emerges from the clash between perspectives. Jung called this the transcendent function, the psyche's power to unite opposites into a higher synthesis. Your mind operates from this transcendent perspective naturally, while most remain stuck in black and white logic. This creates huge communication gaps. When you express nuanced, paradoxical insights, people often react with irritation or demand you pick a side. They think through directed thinking, linear, logical, socially conditioned, while you move through non-directed thinking, associative, symbolic, and fluid. This paradoxical consciousness reveals false simplicities that others depend on. You can see that political ideologies hold partial truths but miss the whole picture, that true psychological health means integrating, not erasing, negative traits, and that wisdom often sounds contradictory to those chasing certainty. The deepest truths can't be boxed into tidy philosophies. Comment if you've ever been accused of being indecisive just because you see every angle. I think in spectrums, not absolutes. Jung knew that paradoxical thinking wasn't confusion, it was psychological sophistication. Yet that very sophistication leads to one of the hardest realities of rare consciousness. Jung made a stunning discovery. Individuals with this level of awareness don't just transform internally, they catalyze transformation in others. And here lies the great challenge. This catalytic influence operates unconsciously, often provoking powerful emotional reactions you can't quite explain. I call this catalytic consciousness, rooted in Jung's concept of individuation energy. Once your psyche begins the journey toward wholeness, your mere presence awakens dormant potential in others, whether they're ready for it or not. As Jung said, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But what happens when one personality carries transformational energy, and the other clings desperately to staying the same? If you possess this rare form of mind, you've likely noticed that your presence alone can provoke strong and unpredictable reactions. People are either magnetically drawn to you or strangely uneasy around you. Simple conversations often turn into deep psychological exchanges. Strangers confide secrets they've never spoken aloud. Your questions seem to unlock hidden insights within others. Yet, just as often, some people grow defensive or even hostile without any clear reason. Jung discovered that this happens because individuated consciousness naturally activates what he called the self-archetype in others, their deepest potential for wholeness. But most egos fear this force, as it threatens their familiar sense of identity. This catalytic effect explains much of what confuses you socially. Why certain people are instantly attracted to your energy, why others feel threatened by your presence or your probing insights, why casual relationships become unexpectedly intense, and why you seem to bring out both the best and worst in people. Here's what Jung understood that few others do. You're not trying to change anyone. You're simply being authentic to your individuated nature. The transformations occur because your psychological wholeness unconsciously invites others to confront their own fragmentation. Jung called such individuals wounded healers, people who have turned their own pain into wisdom that can awaken healing in others. You've become what Jung described as a cultural creative, someone whose consciousness anticipates the next phase of human psychological evolution. Comment below if people have ever told you that meeting you changed their life. You're not altering them, you're mirroring their own potential. The challenge is that this transformative energy works whether you want it to or not. You can't switch off your individuation. It radiates through your energy, your gaze, your words, and your way of perceiving reality. And that brings us to the final, most profound sign. Here lies the ultimate indication that you possess one of these rare minds, the drive Jung considered the defining feature of advanced consciousness. You're not merely interested in self-improvement. You feel compelled toward what he called individuation. Jung defined individuation as the process through which a person becomes an integrated, unified whole, a distinct and indivisible psychological being. But for minds like yours, individuation isn't a choice or a lifestyle trend. It's an inner mandate, a psychic necessity, as natural as breathing. This is what I call evolutionary consciousness, the psyche's instinctive movement toward authenticity, balance, and inner unity. If you carry this rare awareness, transformation isn't something you decide to pursue, it calls you. Something deep within pushes you forward, even when it's uncomfortable. Jung observed that individuating minds follow consistent patterns. They are drawn again and again to experiences that dismantle their old assumptions. Their greatest growth often follows crisis. Comfort makes them restless, and they instinctively seek mentors, teachings, and life experiences that accelerate development. You understand that psychological death and rebirth are essential to genuine evolution. But here's what makes this truly extraordinary. Jung found that those who reach this stage don't just transform themselves, they become catalysts for collective transformation. Your personal evolution contributes directly to what Jung called the collective unconscious, the vast, shared field of human psychological experience. The collective unconscious, the shared reservoir of humanity's psychological evolution. This innate drive toward growth explains why you feel compelled to explore yourself at the deepest levels. You willingly face the inner material most people run from. You notice patterns and recurring cycles in your personal evolution. You trust the transformation process, even when it tears you apart. You feel a profound duty to become your most authentic self. Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Your rare mind doesn't just grasp this as an idea. You live it as a sacred responsibility, both to yourself and to the collective human psyche. Yet this individuating journey can feel deeply lonely. You're becoming something that doesn't yet exist within ordinary awareness, a pioneer walking through unexplored psychological landscapes that few can even conceive. But Jung discovered something luminous within that loneliness. The individuated mind eventually transcends the craving for external validation. You begin to experience profound companionship with your true, integrated self, the union of your conscious and unconscious potentials. Comment if you recognize yourself as someone called to become who you truly are. I choose conscious evolution. So, there it is, the 8 unmistakable signs that your mind operates on a wavelength 99% of people can't comprehend. If these patterns resonate with you, remember what I said at the start. Your mind processes reality in ways most people literally can't perceive. And now you know why. You're not broken, complicated, or strange. You're what Carl Jung described as an individuated consciousness, a psyche whose evolution represents the next step in humanity's development. Your ability to think in multidimensional layers, to interpret symbols, to integrate shadow, to endure existential homesickness, to practice psychological archaeology, to embrace paradox, to catalyze transformation in others, and to surrender to individuation. These aren't flaws to fix. They're gifts to honor. Jung revealed that minds like yours play a vital role in humanity's unfolding evolution. You are a bridge, linking the conscious and unconscious realms, translating the psyche's symbolic language, and exploring frontiers of awareness that others cannot yet see. Your difference isn't a limitation. It's an opening, a doorway to a higher dimension of understanding. And the world urgently needs those who can open doors that others don't even know are there. The question isn't whether you possess one of these rare minds. If you've come this far, you almost certainly do. The real question is, what will you do with this awareness? Jung devoted his life to studying minds like yours because he knew that individuated consciousness serves as the catalyst for collective psychological transformation. Your journey toward authenticity is not just personal. It's part of the evolution of human consciousness itself. Welcome to the 1%. Your true adventure is only beginning. If you'd like to explore Jung's insights more deeply, watch my video, When the Narcissist Realizes the Empath Has Learned Their Language, where we uncover how individuated consciousness responds to manipulation. And if this message helped you understand your rare mind, consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes the most individuated act is helping another soul recognize their own uniqueness. The world needs your rare mind. Jung understood this, and now, hopefully, so do you. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.